I think every brand should wake up every morning with the mindset that they are a challenger brand. If you don't see yourself that way, the next couple of years are going to be incredibly difficult.
Hi, I'm Jason Harris, and you're listening to Soul and Science. Fast forward your marketing mind in about 20 minutes. This week, I'm joined by Shiv Singh, Chief Marketing and Customer Experience Officer at LendingTree. Shiv joined LendingTree in January of this year, so he's really new to the team. And he came from the Expedia Group, where he served as SVP and General Manager for the world-class travel brand, charged with driving brand loyalty and long-term customer value amid the coronavirus pandemic. A challenge for sure, which we'll talk about. Previously, Shiv worked as CMO for med tech startup Ergo, successfully repositioning the brand during a crucial high-growth period for the business. His impressive career includes senior leadership positions at Visa, PepsiCo, and the agency Razorfish. Shiv's been inducted into the American Advertising Federation Hall of Achievement. He's been recognized by Forbes as a Forbes Next CMO, Ad Age as a media maven, Business Insider as a payments industry game changer, Adweek as a top 50 marketer twice, so I guess that puts you in the top 25, and the Internationalist as a top 100 influential leader. Lastly, and finally, he is the author of 2 award-winning social media and marketing books, Savvy, Navigating Fake Companies, Fake Leaders, and Fake News, and Social Media Marketing for Dummies, which is a classic. Today's episode theme is How Trust Builds the Most Powerful Brands. What a resume. Thanks for joining us, Shiv. We appreciate you being here. Before we get into trust, I want to start with your origin story, because you've worked with some of the biggest brands in the world. And I want to know, a lot of people in marketing and advertising are either happenstance marketers or, like me, I wanted to be in advertising since I was about 14. And so I wonder how your story morphed into where you are today in the Hall of Fame, a really well-known CMO, an author. Did you always think about marketing, or how did that happen to you?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question, Jason. I've got to admit, I did not think about marketing. What I did think about, though, which it comes through in my background as well, is I always wanted to be a writer. Like from the time I started writing, I never wanted to stop writing. And even now, I warn my teams and my peers and my bosses. There are occasions when I will write an email that's just too long, and don't mind, I apologize in advance for that. So my passion, the way I think, the way I'm wired, is as a writer. I wrote short fiction when I was in high school. I went to a business university, but I did my honors thesis in writing fiction. I've written 2 books since then. And what I love about the world of marketing is I get to bring my writing side, the idea of expression, the idea of formulating strong thoughts, the idea of making an argument, making a case for something, and bringing out to the world in different forms. So I come to the table very much so as a writer. Now, how I got into marketing, I would say that was more by chance. I entered the workforce in 1999 when the internet boom was exploding, and we were all excited about everything internet. And I saw the power of digital technology changing our lives for the future. And I just wanted to be a part of it. I didn't have the right kind of skills to be a technologist, and didn't want to be, but I wanted to be a part of this tectonic shift that was happening in the world around us. So I joined an agency. I started doing user experience design, and creating customer experiences. But one thing led to another. I did grad school research in social network theory, and I ended up as a full-time marketer.
Amazing. And do you feel like you still scratch enough of that writing itch now?
Never enough. Never
enough. Okay.
I mean, I go to bed every night thinking in my head about my next book.
That's amazing. I mean, I spent 3 years on a book. I never really wanted to be a writer or an author. I thought I had a point of view and something to say, which is why I did it. And it is a real wrestling match to get something like that done. So I'm inspired that you still have that itch to scratch and you still love writing, because it is really hard work. I think your category experience is really vast and broad, from financial to travel, sort of starting really in CPG, also entrepreneurial, starting your own thing as well, which I know to get clients as an entrepreneur as well. You're building trust with the clients you work with and the brands you work with, and then when you're a CMO and you think about your consumer and your core audience, all those categories that you work in do rely on consumer trust. And do you have I don't know, values or guidelines or some way that when you come into a corporation, you say, well, we have to build trust, and this is sort of the way I do it?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes. And it comes from two different strains in my background. The first was I did graduate school at the London School of Economics, and my grad research was in social network theory with an emphasis on what makes information travel and what makes people receive and absorb information. And trust is a very big piece of that. It's do they trust the sender? Do they trust the format? Do they trust the context? Do they have a long term history of trust with that other party? That is a big part of it. So I draw a lot of inspiration from that work, how information travels in social networks. But the other piece was, as I wrote the book Savvy and Navigating Fake News and Fake Leaders and Fake Companies, I actually went back and did a whole lot of research in trust theory. And I'm a big believer, and those who studied psychology and trust would appreciate this. I'm a big believer in the Morton Joish philosophy. So he's considered the father of modern day theory on trust. And it's the whole idea that trust is built on the premise that you believe you're going to get something in return for what you give and what you expect. So it's quite simply that your expectations match reality. And we trust people and things if our expectations keep matching the reality of what we experience again and again. And to build that trust, you have to take what's called a trust leap. I joined this podcast with certain assumptions of what it would be like. I hadn't had any experience of doing a podcast with you, Jason. That was a trust leap I took. The fact that it matches my expectation means I'm going to trust you again, and I'll do another podcast with you. I mean, that's if you were to have me. So that basic premise goes to the heart of how I think about trust, and it has a very direct influence on how I think about brand building in the future, especially because we live in a hyper transparent world.
And when you wrote Savvy and that idea, and then you did research on trust, and we live in this fake news post trust era, but it is at the same time all about transparency. How is that today different than maybe in the past?
Yeah. So firstly, some of the challenges with fake news and misinformation aren't new. They've been around a long time. You know, my favorite example is when Massachusetts was a colony in the British Empire. The governor of Massachusetts gave permission for the first newspaper in the United States to be published. But 3 weeks after its publishing, he shut it down because he felt it was just full of too much fake news. So everything we talk about today, and whether it's on the fake news side or building trust with brands and businesses, there's a long history of it. What has changed, though, is the internet has put everything on steroids. So the way information travels, and while there's hyper transparency, I get to see everything, it doesn't mean it's any more trusted or believable. In fact, there's also so much more information that it's become much harder to discern, fact from fiction, truth from lies. So that's one big piece that's happening. The other thing that has changed, and this makes it very hard for marketing, for brand building, for just being good members of society, is we have retreated to our echo chambers, our wonderful, cute tribes where everybody, and I'm generalizing, but where everybody looks and sounds like us and thinks like us. And we get into a feeding frenzy where we keep upping on each other on more and more extreme opinions. And unfortunately, it is social media platforms that enable and allow and inadvertently encourage this. This has massive implications for brand building because for a brand to do well, it has to penetrate those tribes or those echo chambers. But when you penetrate those echo chambers, you have to be careful of what you may find. You may realize, oh my gosh, I'm in a space where I don't want my brand to be. It's not aligned to our purpose. It's not aligned to our own value system.
I always think about, the psychologist Jonathan Haidt has this famous line that the human mind is a story processor, not a logic processor. And when we think about trust and building trust, stories are stickier than just facts and logic and data, right? How does that correlate with trust and transparency?
So I I think it's incredibly important. Um, I think we run our lives through the lens of stories, without a doubt. Um, I think stories are a mechanism with which to build trust, sustain trust, to to put context around trust, and to make trust make us appreciate a trusted piece of information. Where I think we have a really interesting dichotomy in our world today is whether it's in the lens of marketing or more broadly, we've gotten obsessed and fascinated with data. And because there's a lot of it, and you can put it in a spreadsheet, or you can put an algorithm against it, or an AI processor, and it'll spit out an easy answer. The problem with that is it often lacks the context, it lacks the storytelling to give it meaning. We're irrational people. And as a result, you run the risk, if you're in a corporation, of building a brand where you're buying your customers again and again versus earning a deeper, more emotionally rich shared relationship. And I'll give you an example. I don't drive a Volvo, but I'll always like a Volvo. And at some point in my future, I will probably buy a Volvo, the car. And the reason for that is when I was young, my dad drove a Volvo and he'd tell me stories about why he likes the car and I have memories of the places we'd go together in that. That's a myth. That's a story, in my life today. Um, there's very little data that comes out of that a marketer can use and say, let's go after Shiv and target people like him to sell more Volvo cars to. But it's deep. I have a deep connection with it.
Yeah, and I always think about that idea that great companies don't give us something to buy; great companies give us something to believe in. It's got to be something bigger, a bigger mythology, a bigger story that you're trying to talk to the customer about. And when you think about the financial category and trust, is that a particularly challenging category that consumers trust less than other categories, or is that because you're dealing with money, is it somehow easier to build trust with a consumer, or is it ultimately harder because it's financial?
Yeah. So I looked at this really carefully, especially when I was at Visa, because I was responsible for the brand for a few years while I was there. And what I discovered is consumers really trusted their banks and they really trusted payment networks like Visa. And it was because the banks did exactly what they thought they would do for them. So if I go back to that Morton Deutsch definition of expectations matching reality. However, while the banks were trusted, there was no love, there was no myth, there was no storytelling, there was no deep affinity. The banks were invariably reduced to utilities in their minds, in the minds of the consumers. So it was a case of high trust, low myth, and therefore not enough heart, which made less loyalty. And the only reason why consumers wouldn't move across banks or across financial companies, it was just inertia. Like, I use the same bank I originally signed up for when I was in college, and it's just effort to move it off. It's not tied to any greater connection with that specific brand. So that's where trust can, in some instances, not matter, actually. I mean, the trust is good. You always want trust, but it's not enough. You can have high trust, but low connection too.
Right. You need both of those things. And so when you think about LendingTree, which is a real, uh, we've had this discussion. Is it a legacy brand? Is it a challenger brand? How do you see your charter and the way you're going to move this brand forward between that idea of like short term and long term? There's performance marketing that's getting new customers. If there's churn, you're always kind of filling, like it's like a coal train. You're always like putting the coal to keep the train going. But at the same time, you need to carve out a bigger idea for the brand that people can believe in, that's not just purely transactional. It has to mean something bigger. How do you sort of see that approach? And maybe it's a modern marketing mix question, but how do you see that? Obviously, you're pretty new there, so you're sorting it out. But do you have sort of a mindset of how you're going to build LendingTree into a great brand?
There are few things that really matter to me. So the first is, I think every brand should wake up every morning with the mindset that they are a challenger brand. If you don't see yourself that way, the next couple of years are going to be incredibly difficult. That's the first piece. The second is, with LendingTree, I'm incredibly humbled and excited to be working on the team, because this is a brand that it's been around for 26 years. It's served more than 100 million customers, and it works like a highly predictable machine. And that's just incredible. It now needs to complement that incredible performance marketing with a much higher sense of purpose and a much stronger brand voice than it may have needed to in the past. Because to go from that 100 million customers, and the 30 or 50 billion in serviced loans, to doubling that, it takes the rational and the irrational side of human interactions. What we're going to do, and what we are doing, is we're attacking it simultaneously across multiple areas. We're making our performance marketing more brand centric. So, the challenge I've put to my performance marketers is, I want you to keep delivering the amazing, phenomenal results that you have, but you also have to check these 5 boxes from a brand standpoint, with every creative, every message, every line, every word that's in that performance marketing. That's one side to it. The other side to it is, we're going back to our roots to really understand what makes LendingTree LendingTree. It has incredible high aided awareness. Whoever I talk to about LendingTree, they know of the brand. The third piece is, and working with my peers at LendingTree, is to really hone in on the customer benefits through the lens of product and brand innovation. And we're going to do that as well, because we're in a day and age where our consumers, they've just come out of COVID. You know, there couldn't be a greater dichotomy between Wall Street and Main Street. People are struggling financially. We're entering a high mortgage rates environment. It's no one wants to deal with their finances, but we're feeling that pressure. We're making these wonderful life choices of around the great resignation. But we wake up one morning and realize, oh my God, I feel so proud. I resigned from a job I didn't like, but now I don't know how to manage my finances. So there's a lot going on in the world. We have a unique and powerful role in helping and advising and guiding and supporting people through that and helping them win financially. And that's what we're going to do. And it'll be product innovation, brand innovation, going to the roots of our business, of how LendingTree began, and then also making performance marketing and brand marketing stop working in silos, but working as one.
I love that answer. It's super clear. You have a really clear plan and roadmap. And the thing I picked up on there is because my question was going to be, it seems like there's the heart and the head, and the performance marketing piece, the transactional piece is humming along, and you're going to kind of add the brand piece or the heart piece or the story piece to it, to the mix. But you're also saying to the data performance piece, you're going to put some heart into that as well. So it's not just separating the head and the heart. It's kind of that has to be present in both places.
Absolutely. I mean, that's when the magic happens, and that's where I want my performance marketers to care as deeply about the brand as my brand lead, and vice versa. And the way I think about it, I my wife married me not just for my head or my heart. I want to believe it was for both. That's what makes us whole. And coincidentally, my wife is the co-author of Savvy, so we worked on that together. So all the trust conversations happen in our house as well.
Here's a soulful question for you. As an author and writer that plays as a CMO, because the first thing you said was you're a writer, are you reading anything right now, fiction or nonfiction, that is inspiring you?
Yes, I am. And I mean, I should caveat it that I just about finished listening to it uh, because I've been on the road quite a bit. It's called The Splendid and the Vile, and it's a book about Winston Churchill during the Battle of Britain and his leadership qualities. So this was in the context of World War II, when the Germans were bombing London, and when uh, the United Kingdom thought America was not going to enter the war, and they were the last ones standing, so to speak, against against Hitler. And it's an incredible story of leadership, of the untidiness of humanity, how we all have our weaknesses, and how we can learn to rise to the occasion, whatever that occasion may be.
I love that. And perseverance. Do you have any inspirational quotes or mantras that you think about that helps define who you are?
Honesty is the highest form of loyalty. And and I think that matters a lot as I work with my own leadership team, as I work with my bosses and my peers, as I work with partners like you. Um, we're in difficult times. I mean, if you think about the war in Ukraine, the tragedy that's unfolding there, we are just coming out of a global pandemic. We may be going back into one. Who knows? As I said, we couldn't have bigger divisions between Wall Street and Main Street. Uh, People are struggling. For us to make a difference and have an impact and to fight the misinformation wars, it takes more honesty, and we have to demand that of each other, because that's when we can break out of the stagnant ruts that we may find ourselves in. And that's what I ask of my team, and I warn my boss that's what I'll give him, because it's honesty is the highest form of loyalty.
I think honesty is the highest form of loyalty is the perfect summation and exclamation point on a podcast that you've really taught us a lot about building trust to build a powerful brand. And I think honesty is how brands, honesty and transparency is really how brands connect and break through and build that trust. Well, thank you. You're incredible. I've followed your career since we worked together 10 years ago and now today. And it was great chatting with you. And thanks for all your wisdom. We really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much for having me on, and congratulations on all the incredible successes that Mekanism has had over the last decade.
Soul and Science is a Mekanism podcast produced by Maggie Bowles, Ryan Tillotson, Tyler Nielsen, Emma Swanson, and Lily Jablonski. The show is edited by Daniel Ferreira with theme music by Kyle Merritt. And I'm your host, Jason Harris.